Rain pressed against the glass of St. Gabriel Medical Center, a steady hiss that slipped through the seams of the emergency department. The ceiling lights hummed. The air smelled of antiseptic stale coffee and rubber gloves. Riley Hart did not notice the rain or the hum. Her world was a rectangle of exposed skin and bright white light. "Hold still," she said softly. The man on the gurney clenched his teeth while she guided the needle through the torn flesh of his abdomen. The cut was long but clean as a shard of glass from a car wreck. Blood beaded, then slowed as her stitches drew the skin together. Her hands moved in quick, precise motions. No wasted movement. No hesitation. "That's your car?" one of the techs asked the patient, nodding toward the bay doors, where the mangled sedan sat. The man tried to laugh and winced instead. "I hope not," Riley said. "You are entirely too fixable for that." The tech snorted. The man relaxed a little. Riley tied the last knot, clipped the suture, and stepped back. She stripped off her gloves, tossed them, and only then let herself exhale. The overhead speaker crackled. "Code Blue Room 7. Someone else would catch that. Not her case, not yet." She peeled off her gown and reached for a fresh one. The cuff of her scrub top lifted and revealed a fine, pale line along her wrist, a scar that did not match any hospital accident. She tugged the sleeve back down without thinking. The scar disappeared. The habit remained. Outside the curtained bay, the emergency corridor pulsed with noise. Phones rang. Wheels squealed on linoleum. A toddler cried somewhere high and thin. A television bolted to the wall played a news segment with the volume muted. On the screen, a helicopter hovered over a desert landscape, rotors chopping the air. Riley's eyes flicked toward it just for a heartbeat, then away. "Riley, you free," a nurse called. She stepped into the hall. A woman in her late 20s stood with her back against the wall, arms wrapped around herself. Her clothes were wrinkled, her eyes swollen. In her arms, a little boy clung to a stuffed dinosaur, his cheeks flushed, breath shallow. "This is Benji Carter," the nurse said. "Post-pneumonia, 4 years old. His mom says his lips turned a little blue." The mother cut in, voice shaking. "Just for a second. Then it faded. But he looks wrong." Riley crouched so she was eye level with the boy. "Hey, Benji, I am Riley. That a T-Rex?" He nodded barely. His small fingers dug into the toy. His chest rose and fell too quickly. There was a faint whistling in his breath like a kettle before it boils. Riley touched his arm, warm, too warm. "Any pain when you breathe?" she asked. He shrugged. "Hurts a little." The nurse tapped the monitor. "Pulse ox is 92, but it keeps dipping. Dr. Briggs already saw him on his way out. Said it is probably anxiety from the hospital stay." Riley's jaw tightened. Dr. Leonard Briggs liked to finish his shift on time. He liked clear charts more than messy humans. "Let me take him for a quick check," Riley said. "If Dr. Briggs has concerns, he can yell at me tomorrow." She led the boy and his mother into a small exam room and closed the curtain. The hum of the department softened. "Mom, you can sit right there," Riley said, pulling a stool closer for her. "Benji, can I listen to your chest?" He nodded again. His skin was a little gray around the mouth now. The monitor beeped, the numbers dipping, climbing, dipping again. Riley pressed the stethoscope to his back and closed her eyes. She listened. The sounds were not right. Air moved better on one side than the other. There was a faint shift, a distant hollow note under the breath like wind in a cracked bottle. "Deep breath for me," she murmured. He tried. The right side lagged. She checked his trachea, her fingers sliding along the small curve of his throat. Slight deviation. She pulled back, a heart rate ticking up in her ears. Cyanosis. Unequal breath sounds. Rapid onset. "Is he okay?" the mother. "Is he?" His mother asked. Riley heard the fear in the woman's voice. Heard something else too, a brittle edge she recognized. She heard that same tone years ago in the desert from soldiers who pretended they were not scared until the moment they were. "Noisy hall," Riley said. "I want to get him more comfortable in treatment so we can give him some help. Can you walk with us?" She scooped Benji up, his weight light against her chest, his breath warm on her neck, his small hand fisted in her scrub top. Outside the room, Dr. Briggs was finishing a conversation with a resident. He wore a crisp white coat dotted with a single coffee stain that annoyed him enough to keep glancing at it. "Doctor," Riley said, "Benji Carter is not an anxiety case. He's going downhill." Briggs checked his watch. "I saw him heart. He is stable enough for outpatient follow-up. His mother is understandably nervous. We cannot admit every nervous mother in Riverside." Riley shifted Benji in her arms so the boy's face was visible. "Look at his lips," she said. "Listen to his breath. He needs intervention now." Briggs sighed, the long-suffering kind. "We do not diagnose by feelings," he said. "Drop him off in observation. If his numbers tank the on-call, we'll address it." He turned away. Riley watched his back for half a second. The hallway noise pushed in around her. A monitor alarm chirped in another room. An orderly joked with someone near the desk. Time stretched thin. She moved. In the supply alcove, she flagged a tech. I need the emergency kit, now, the one with the needle thoracostomy set. The tech blinked, then nodded and handed over the kit from the locked cabinet. He did not ask for an order. He knew better than to stall that tone of voice. Riley laid Benji on a gurney, tilted his head, gave him a quick mask of supplemental oxygen. The pulse ox slid down to 88 and then 86. Riley, what are you doing? The nurse from earlier whispered, hovering near the door. Fixing the part where he stops breathing, Riley said. She scrubbed a spot on Benji's chest with antiseptic, her hand steady. She marked the intercostal space with the tip of her finger. She did not think about policies. She thought about pressure building where air should be free. Benji, this will feel strange then better, she said. Squeeze your dinosaur okay? He nodded, eyes huge. The needle slid in. There was a soft resistance, then a release. A hiss of trapped air. His chest rose more evenly. The color crept back into his lips like someone turning up a dimmer switch. The monitor climbed, 90, 94. The mother clapped a hand over her mouth, tears spilling. The nurse whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Riley withdrew the needle, secured the line, taped it down. Her hands moved almost on their own, drawing on muscle memory from places no one at St. Gabriel knew she had been. Outside the room, footsteps approached. Dr. Briggs pulled the curtain open, eyes sharp. What is going on here? He demanded. He took in the setup, the discarded packaging, the small boy breathing more easily. You performed an invasive procedure without a physician order, he said. Without consent, on a pediatric patient. The mother turned, still crying. She saved him, she said. He could not breathe. Briggs did not look at her. Consent was implied, Riley said. He was decompensating. Briggs' jaw clenched. We will discuss this, he said, in a proper setting. He left. The curtain swung once in his wake. Riley checked Benji's vitals one more time. The boy was already drowsy, his breath slower, more even. She brushed his hair back from his forehead. Good job, buddy, she said. You did the hard part. Hours blurred after that. Patients came and went. Monitors beeped. The rain outside thickened, drumming on the hospital roof. Later, in a small conference room with no windows, Riley sat opposite Dr. Briggs and Evelyn Powell, the hospital's administrator. A folder with her name on it lay on the table between them. Briggs spoke in a calm, clipped tone. You acted without authorization, Mbihi said. You ignored the attending physician's assessment. You accessed equipment that requires explicit orders. Riley kept her eyes on the folder. Her hands lay flat on her knees. He was in respiratory distress, she said. I recognized a tension pneumothorax. I relieved it. Powell steepled her fingers. We are not disputing the outcome, she said. The boy lived. That is good. The question is how you chose to get there. You would prefer he did not, Riley asked. Powell's mouth thinned. That is not what I said, she replied. We have liability to consider. Chain of command, scope of practice. One person deciding they know best is a risk this institution cannot ignore. Silence settled over the room, heavy and stale. Riley thought of Benji's lips turning gray, of the hiss of released air, of the way his chest finally moved the same on both sides. I did my job, she said. Briggs tapped the folder with one finger. And now we have to do ours, he said. From somewhere in the building, faint through the walls, the overhead speaker chimed. Attention all emergency department staff, a voice said. This is a code orange, mass casualty incident inbound. All available personnel report to intake immediately. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The rain kept falling. Riley exhaled once and stood. She opened the door. Riley stepped into the corridor and the hospital swallowed her. Voices collided in the air. The usual noise of the emergency department had a different pitch, now tighter, higher. Nurses moved faster. Orderlies jogged instead of walked. The smell of antiseptic was already giving way to something harsher that seeped in from the ambulance bay, the dry taste of smoke. At the far end of the hall, intake doors banged open and a rush of cool wet air spilled inside. Rain glittered on the floor tiles. A paramedic shouldered through his jacket streaked black, his face gray with ash. Steel plant fire, he called out. We have more behind us. Burns, crush, injuries, inhalation. This is just the first wave. His patient lay on the stretcher, skin blistered along one arm, eyebrows singed away. He coughed weakly, a deep, raw sound that scraped the throat. Charge nurse Carla pointed, already counting beds in her head. Room 3, get respiratory on standby. Where is Dr. Briggs? On his way, someone answered. Riley moved toward the ambulance bay. The automatic doors wheezed open again and let in a chorus of sirens, shouting the wail of another child crying in a distant gurney. Outside the drive was a mess of red lights and steam. Rain hit hot metal and rose in little ghost clouds. 3 ambulances were nose to tail, back doors flung open. Nurses and techs wove among them, arms full of equipment. There was the metallic tang of blood under the burnt smell. All right, listen up. Carla shouted, voice cutting through the noise. Tag at the door. Red, yellow, green. No one clogs intake. Riley fell into the stream, hands already reaching for the first stretcher. The man on it was barely conscious, his face streaked with soot. His chest rose in short, shallow pulls. The medic at his side yelled over the rain. Victim from inside the blast zone. Possible inhalation injury, laceration across the chest, unconscious, on-scene vitals, unstable. Riley put 2 fingers on his neck. Pulse thready. She peeled back the blanket. A deep cut scored across his ribs, the skin blackened around it. She saw the way his chest shifted slightly to one side with each breath. Red, she said, get an airway ready in Trauma Bay 1. She caught the medic's eyes. Bag him till we have the tube, keep him on 100% oxygen. They rushed past her. Another stretcher rolled into the space the first had left. This one carried a man whose leg ended abruptly at the thigh, the stump wrapped in bandages soaked through to a dark glistening red. Crush injure, the paramedic said, shouting to be heard. Leg pinned under a beam, tourniquet in the field, bleeding is borderline. Riley's gaze flicked to the tourniquet, to the slow seepage around it, to the pale, waxy color of the man's face. Red hug? Juan, she said. Trauma 2, 2 units O negative in the room before he gets there. A tech nodded and peeled off at a sprint. The third ambulance door swung wide. Smoke rolled out from inside. A woman on the stretcher lay still, eyes closed, soot around her mouth. Her skin looked strangely damp and tight blisters forming at her neck and hands. Her breathing sounded almost silent. 3rd degree burns chest and arms, Vikia, the medic said. Inside for at least 15 minutes. We lost the line on the way here. Riley leaned in so close she could feel the faint whisper of air on her cheek as the woman drew breath. Red, Riley said. Burn unit protocol now. Get cooling started, high-flow oxygen, and have someone watch her airway. If it closes, they will not get it back easily. She heard her own voice calm, low, not matching the pulse pounding in her chest. Her hands moved without pause, adjusting masks, checking pupils, glancing at monitors as each stretcher rolled by. Behind her, she heard a sharper voice. Where are the tags? I need tags on every patient. Dr. Briggs had arrived. His hair was still neat, but his tie was crooked. He held a clipboard in one hand. Rain speckled the shoulders of his white coat as he stepped just far enough outside to bark orders. We cannot have people floating through without documentation, he said. I want full name, age, injury, category, time of arrival on every single one. Leonard, we do not have full names, Carla answered. They came in pulled from a pile of bodies. Then use descriptors, Shad, Briggs snapped. Male approximately 40, burned to upper torso, whatever you need. We have to track liability. Riley heard him and tuned him out. A man staggered from the back of a fire truck, not on a stretcher at all. His face was streaked black, his shirt smelled of gasoline. He coughed, folded at the waist, grabbed the side of the ambulance to stay upright. She reached him in 3 strides. Sit, she said, guiding him onto a portable chair. Tell me your name. Jared, he wheezed. I was at the north end. The alarm did not work. We thought it was just a small thing, then the whole line blew. His words broke apart into another fit of coughing, no air moving for an awful span of seconds. Riley grabbed a mask, slapped it over his face, eased his head forward so he could pull air more easily. Slow, she said, in and out. Count with me. Behind her, stretcher wheels squeaked, rain pattered. Somewhere a radio crackled with instructions. The department was a live thing now, all its veins dilated, trying to hold the sudden flood. They filled every trauma bay. They lined gurneys and hallways, pushed machines into corners. Riley moved from room to room, triaging, stabilizing, calling for supplies without raising her voice. Other staff began to fall into her rhythm, handing her what she needed before she asked. She did not think about the conference room or the file with her name on it. She thought instead about breath sounds cap, refill time, pupillary response. At one point, she found herself back at the nurse's station. Her scrubs were streaked with soot. There were faint red smudges along her sleeve where someone had grabbed her. Her hair had come loose from its tie. She pressed her palms flat on the counter for half a second, feeling the slight tremor in her arms. Briggs stood nearby, flipping through the growing stack of triage sheets. Where are the initial assessments for the last 3 reds? He demanded. Who authorized bypassing standard intake? Carla glanced toward Riley. Hart handled them, she said. She was the closest, and they were crashing. Briggs' gaze snapped to Riley. You did not log them, he said. People, he said. We did not have time, she replied. They needed immediate airway fluid resuscitation bleeding control. We can chart after. After is not good enough, he said. We have procedures for a reason. He jabbed a finger at the pile of forms in front of him. Every missing step in the stack can come back on us, on me, on this hospital. Riley held his stare for a moment. Better on us than on their death certificates, she said. Color flared in his cheek. "This is not about your opinion," he said quietly. "This is about structure." They were interrupted as another stretcher crashed through the doors, a man screaming as burned skin brushed against fabric. Riley turned away and went back to work. By mid-afternoon, the worst of it had passed. The sirens faded. The halls were still crowded, but the air was less frantic. Respiratory therapists moved between rooms adjusting ventilators. A janitor quietly mopped up a trail of dried blood that arced across the floor like someone had dragged a paintbrush. Riley washed her hands at a sink, scrubbing under her nails until the water ran clear. When she looked up, her reflection in the metal paper towel dispenser startled her. Soot smeared along her cheekbone. A faint streak of someone else's blood stained her jaw. A voice spoke behind her. "Ms. Hart, administration would like to see you." It was one of the unit clerks. Her expression was careful, as if she were delivering bad news to a patient's family. Riley dried her hands, the paper towel rasping against skin that felt suddenly too thin. The conference room was the same as before. Same fluorescent buzz, same neutral walls. The folder on the table was thicker now. Powell sat at the head of the table, glasses perched on her nose. Briggs sat to her right, a fresh stack of papers in front of him. A man from risk management occupied the third chair suit, perfectly pressed. "Have a seat, Ms. Hart," Powell said. Riley sat. Her legs felt oddly heavy. Briggs cleared his throat. "We have reviewed the events of this morning and the incident last week involving the pediatric patient," he began. "There is a pattern of behavior that concerns us." "A pattern of you being alive because someone moved," Riley thought, but she did not say it. Aloud, she said, "I acted to stabilize patients in critical condition. That is my scope." Risk management slid a document across the table. "Our issue is not the outcomes you all," he said. "Our issue is that you repeatedly disregarded protocols, bypassed the chain of command, and exposed this institution to significant liability." Powell's voice softened, but her words did not. "We recognize your skills, Faisal," she said. "No one is questioning your clinical ability, but you have shown that you cannot or will not operate within the structures we have in place." Riley looked down at the paper. The words blurred for a moment, then sharpened. "Termination of employment. Effective immediately." Her fingertips rested on the edge of the page. Her hands were clean now. No soot, no blood. They looked smaller without tasks to fill them. "If I had stopped to fill out your forms," she said quietly, "some of them would be dead." Powell did not flinch. "And if one family sues because a step was skipped," she replied, "we lose the capacity to help thousands more." Silence again, the kind that hummed in the walls and in the bones. "We are not a field hospital, Ms. Hart," Briggs said. "We are St. Gabriel Medical Center. We protect the system first." The words landed with a dull finality. Powell pushed a pen toward her. "You can sign now," she said, "or take it home and return it tomorrow. The result will be the same." Riley picked up the pen. It felt heavier than any scalpel she had ever held. She signed where the line told her to sign. Her name looked strange, like someone else's handwriting. When it was done, she stood. "Is that all?" she asked. "For today," Powell said. Riley left the room without another word. She walked through the emergency department one last time, past beds, filled with the same people whose charts her name would never appear on. Some of them slept under pale blankets of fur lines looped over their arms. Some stared at the ceiling. A few watched her pass with dazed, unfocused eyes. At the back of the department, a metal door led to the employee exit. A small red sign above it glowed. She pressed the bar. The door swung open. Cool air hit her face. The sound of rain wrapped around her. She stepped outside. The first cold drops hit her bare forearms before the door closed behind her. Rain poured off the hospital awning in sheets, hammering the pavement and turning the parking lot into a quilt of shallow mirrors. The St. Gabriel sign glowed red against the low, dirty clouds. Cars passed on the street beyond headlights smeared by water. Riley stood for a moment just outside the door, the metal cool against her back. The badge that had let her through this entrance every day dangled on her chest for a last second. She unclipped it and dropped it into the pocket of her scrubs. The plastic clicked softly against something solid. Her fingers closed around it. She pulled the small metal rectangle out and curled her hand around it, shielding it from the rain. The old ID tag was scratched, the letters worn from years of rubbing against fabric and armor. Hart Riley. SS 68 W. There was a smudge of dirt she had never quite managed to clean out of one corner. For a heartbeat, the sound of the rain melted into another sound entirely, a heavy churning overhead, men shouting over engines, someone yelling her rank through dust. Her throat tightened. She closed her hand until the edges of the tag dug into her palm and the memory receded. The roar became simple rain again. She slipped the tag into the inner pocket of her jacket, the one she rarely used. Then she shrugged into the jacket, shouldered her worn canvas bag, and walked along the side of the building toward the employee lot. The pavement was slick. Water splashed against her sneakers, soaking through almost at once. She could feel the chill creeping up from the ground and down from the sky at the same time. Her hands, so sure a few hours before, felt aimless now. With no chart to hold or tube to place, they simply gripped the strap of her bag too tightly. She turned the corner of the building and moved toward the bus stop at the edge of the property. The shelter there was a small glass box, its roof rattling under the assault of the rain. A city map peeled at one corner on the wall. No one else waited. Rush hour was still a little way off. Riley stepped under the canopy and exhaled. Within the thin walls, the storm was a little quieter, a muted hiss instead of a roar. Her bag slipped down her shoulder. She let it rest at her feet. For the first time since she signed the paper, the thought formed clearly. She was not going back inside. Through the glass, she could see a sliver of the emergency department. Shapes moved behind the rain-streaked windows, nurses and doctors in blue and white passing through bright corridors. One of the paramedics pushed an empty stretcher toward the bay. Life in the department continued full of alarms and coded announcements, and now it would continue without her name on any of the charts. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She did not check it. She knew it was not from anyone who mattered. Overhead, a low rumble cut through the constant hush of rain. At first, she thought it was thunder, a far-off growl rolling across the sky. The sound grew louder, though steady and mechanical, not the broken boom of a storm. Her shoulders stiffened. The noise dug into her chest in a way the thunder never did, a repetitive thump that lived somewhere in her spine. Her fingers brushed the outline of the ID tag through her jacket without meaning to. A helicopter, she thought. Life flight, maybe. Sometimes they came in during weather like this, banking low over the city to find the pad on the hospital roof. The sound swelled until the shelter itself seemed to vibrate. The glass shuddered in its frame. A gust of wind pushed sheets of rain sideways and drove a fine mist under the canopy. Riley stepped to the edge of the shelter and peered out. The helicopter was not heading for the roof. It swept in low over the main parking lot, its dark body streaked with water. The rotors churned the rain into a frantic white halo. The red tips of the blades blurred into a circle. The machine dropped toward the asphalt between the painted rows of cars as if the rules of the city did not apply. For a moment, the whole hospital seemed to hold its breath. Staff and visitors pressed to windows. A few people who had been walking across the lot ducked and ran, clutching at their coats. The Black Hawk settled hard in the middle of the staff parking area, its landing skids splashing through pooled water. The blast of wind knocked trash cans over and flattened the long grass near the curb. The air filled with the smell of jet fuel and wet concrete. Riley watched from the side, heart beating too fast. The sight hit her in layers. First, the physical shock of a military helicopter where sedans should be. Then, the older recognition, something that lived in the muscles of her neck and shoulders. She had ridden in machines like this. She knew the way the cabin would feel, the way the floor vibrated. Her knees remembered that slight unsteadiness, the way you learn to plant your feet wider. The side door of the helicopter slid open. A figure in soaked camouflage jumped down, ducking under the still spinning blades. The figure ran toward the main entrance, fighting the rotor wash. Inside, at the front of the hospital, people were already pointing. On the third floor in his office overlooking the lot, Dr. Briggs stood at the window, one hand resting on the glass. His tie was straight now. The coffee stain on his shirt had dried to a faint outline. His eyes were wide. Powell stood a step behind him, phone pressed to her ear, the person on the other end forgotten. "What are they doing?" she said to no one in particular. In the lobby, families and patients clustered near the windows. A volunteer dropped a stack of pamphlets on patient rights as gusts of wind rattled the glass. The soldier reached the front doors. The security guard, who had been watching with an expression that moved from awe to concern, met her with his hands half raised. "You cannot land that thing out there," he shouted over the noise leaking in. "There are rules. You cannot just—" "I am looking for Riley Hart," the woman in uniform shouted back. Her hair whipped around her face, dark and soaked. Her name tape read Torres. A subdued American flag patch clung to her shoulder. "Trauma nurse, where is she?" The guard blinked, processing the question. "She was just fired," he said. "She went out the back not 10 minutes ago." Torres did not waste a second to be surprised. "Keep the bird hot," she said into the radio at her shoulder. "I am going to get her." She spun on her heel and ran along the side of the building, boots splashing through puddles. At the bus stop, Riley had backed up a half step as the helicopter came in the wind, flattening her jacket against her body. Now she stood again at the edge of the shelter, watching the scene unfold with a strange, detached clarity. She saw the soldier break into view at the corner of the building, heading straight toward her. For a fleeting moment, she thought they would pass each other, that the woman would run right by looking for someone deeper inside the hospital. Then Torres's gaze locked on her face. She adjusted her path as if she had known all along where Riley would be. "Staff Sergeant Hart," she called, slowing only enough to be heard over the rain. Riley's grip tightened on the strap of her bag. "I'm not Staff Sergeant anything," she said. "Not anymore." Torres stopped in front of her chest, heaving water dripping off the brim of her cap. "Riley Hart?" she said, leaving no space for argument. "Former combat medic Shadow Team Omega-3. You match the file and the photo. I have been looking for you." Riley swallowed. The sound of the rotors filled the emptiness between them. "You are a few years late," she said. Torres shook her head. "Jackal 1 is pinned to phone down," she said. "We are 6 hours out. They took a hit from an unknown device, multiple casualties. They asked for a medic with a specific trauma profile and a clean civilian trail. They asked for you by name." The world narrowed to the downpour, the pounding in Riley's ears and Torres' words. "Who asked?" Riley said. Her voice was almost lost in the wind. "Sergeant Major Logan Price," Torres replied. "He will not let anyone else touch him. He said if you are breathing, you are the one he wants." The name landed with weight. For a moment, the parking lot dissolved. Heat pressed in instead of cold. Sand, not rain, hit her face. Logan lying on a tarp with blood soaking the dust under his back, joking weakly while she worked on him. The taste of metal in the air. Back in the rain, Riley realized her hand had gone to her chest. Fingers pressing against the ID tag through the fabric. She let her bag slide from her shoulder. It thumped against the concrete, already wet. "I am not on active duty," she said. "You have other medics. You have surgeons." "We have medics who follow protocols policiers," Torres said. "We do not have another you." His words, not mine. For a second, neither of them spoke. Behind Torres, the helicopter waited, rotors still beating the air into submission. Behind Riley, St. Gabriel loomed, its windows bright and sealed against the storm. She turned her head and looked at the hospital. Through the rain streaks, she could just make out the glow of the emergency department sign. The same halls where she had just been told she was a risk stood full of people she would never treat again. She looked back at the Black Hawk. The ramp had lowered a little, ready for someone to climb aboard. Her jaw set. "How long to the zone?" she asked. 6 hours wheels up, Torres said. Relief flickered across her face, quick and genuine. "We can brief you on the way." Riley bent, picked up her bag, then thought better of it. She pulled the ID tag from her pocket and slipped it into the inside of her jacket where it would not fall. The bag, full of a life that had just been cut off at the root, stayed on the ground. "Keep it," she said to no one, and started toward the helicopter with Torres at her side. The closer she got, the more the noise swallowed everything else. Her hair whipped around her face, wet and wild. The wind tore at her jacket. The smell of fuel filled her lungs. At the open door, a crew chief reached out a hand. She grabbed it and climbed in. The cabin was as she remembered, and not at all the same. Metal benches, straps hanging from the ceiling. A crate of medical supplies lashed to one wall. She clipped her harness without needing to be shown how. The crew chief slapped the side of the door twice. The pilot acknowledged with a brief nod. The engine revved. The helicopter lifted, rising away from the parking lot, the hospital, the abandoned bag. Riley felt the weight settle into her shoulders. Not the weight of being fired. Something older. Something she had thought she had put down. Her hands found the latches on the medical kit beside her and began to open it. Inside, everything was strapped down for flight. Clear plastic metal gleam, coiled tubing. Saline bags flattened by altitude. Packages of gauze with tiny printed writing. She unhooked, sorted, reshaped the chaos into an order that matched the map in her head. Tourniquets here. Large bore IV catheters here. Fentanyl vials to the side. Needle thoracostomy set front and center. The helicopter shuddered through a pocket of rough air. Riley tightened her harness with one hand and kept working with the other. Across from her, Major Torres watched, cheekbone lit by the dull red interior light. "You remember how to ride one of these?" Torres asked through the headset. Riley glanced at the strap over her own shoulders, at the way her boots braced against the floor without her thinking about it. "Looks like it," she said. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm, distant. 6 hours to the forward staging area. Weather is clear past the city. "Patch me into Jackal 1's forward medic," Riley said. "I want vitals on all casualties." There was a short burst of static, then another voice slid into her ears, younger, tight with strain. "This is Specialist Damon, attached medic for Jackal 1. "This is Hart on inbound birds," Riley said. "Give me a quick rundown." 4 primary casualties, Damon said. His words came fast, clipped, like he had repeated them several times already. Sergeant Major Logan Price, male, late 30s, femoral arterial bleed, Left leg from blast fragment, field tourniquet applied 3 liters crystalloid in still hypotensive tachycardic. Patient 2, Staff Sergeant Miller pelvis. Crush from collapsed wall, unstable pelvis, suspected internal bleed, no evac yet. Patient 3, Corporal Hines blast lung by lateral contusion saturations in the mid-80s on high-flow oxygen. Patient 4, PFC Torres, no relation, non-penetrating, blast possible, concussion, minor lacerations. Any tension signs on Price? Riley asked. Tracheal deviation, diminished breath sounds, jugular distension. A pause. She could almost hear Damon checking. Breath sounds are slightly decreased on the right, he said. He is guarding his side, but I have been focused on the leg. I do not have a chest x-ray. Obviously, Valle, Riley said. Is his chest rising symmetrically? Not quite, Damon admitted. Keep pressure on the tourniquet, Riley said. Do not loosen it to check pulses. Watch his mental status. If he gets more confused, or if his breathing drops, I want to know right away. Yes, ma'am. She heard herself being called ma'am and let it slide. She clicked her mic off and turned back to the kit, mentally layering Damon's words over the supplies in front of her. Torres leaned forward a little. Logan talked about you like you were some kind of ghost, she said. Said you sewed him back together in the desert with a needle and stubbornness. Riley's mouth twitched. He exaggerates, she said. There was also duct tape. Torres huffed out a short breath that was almost a laugh, then grew serious again. He told me once, Torres said, if he ever built his own team, you are the first call. Riley did not answer. She fitted a laryngoscope blade into place, checked the light, then snapped it off and set it carefully where she could reach it. The flight dragged and also vanished. Outside, the landscape shifted from city lights to black fields, then to low-shadowed hills. Inside, time shrank down to heart rates and imagined anatomy. As they neared the forward base, the darkness below began to glow. A ring of sodium lights, tall fences, the muted silver shapes of vehicles parked in tight rows. The pilot dipped the nose slightly. 2 minutes out, he said. Riley buckled the kit closed and mentally walked through the first 30 seconds on the ground. The Black Hawk dropped into the landing zone and dust rose to meet it, even though the last rain here had been days ago. The world became a storm of grit and rotor wash. Floodlights turned the dust into a golden blur. The crew chief slid the door open and gestured. Riley unclipped and followed Torres to the edge. Heat hit her as she stepped to the lip heat from engines from packed bodies from this place that was a world away from the chilled air of St. Gabriel. They jumped down together. The tarmac vibrated under her boots. The smell here was fuel and sweat and a faint metallic tang that never quite left these sights. Soldiers waited at the edge of the zone, a cluster of dark shapes. A stretcher team broke away as soon as Riley's boots hit the ground and headed toward a low tent marked with a red cross. Torres had to shout to be heard. Casualty collection inside the main tent, she said. Price is there. Riley adjusted the straps of the kit on her shoulder and ran. The tent was stifling. The air inside was thick, hot, crowded with bodies and the constant noise of people working. Lanterns and portable lamps threw harsh light and darker shadows. Cots lined the space, some empty, others occupied by men in various stages of injury and awareness. In the center, surrounded by 2 harried medics and a scatter of blood-filled gauze, Logan Price lay on a table. He looked smaller without his gear, pale skin under the dust. Sweat shone on his forehead. The sheet over his lower body was stained a deep, spreading red at his left thigh, where a tourniquet bit into flesh. Logan, Riley said. His eyes were half-lidded. At the sound of her voice, they cracked open the rest of the way. Recognition cut through the haze. You took your time, Hart, he rasped. His voice was raw, but there was a ghost of a grin. You bleed all over my day off, Chiquet, she said. That is on you. One of the medics, a young man with a buzz cut and hands that shook just a little, stepped back as Riley moved in. You must be Hart, he said. Specialist Damon. I am sorry We are past sorry, she said. What are his last vitals? BP 80/50, heart rate 140, respirations 32. He is altered off baseline in and out. She put her hands to work. With one quick motion, she lifted the sheet. The tourniquet was high on the thigh, tight enough that the skin bulged above it. Blood still seeped slowly under the bandage packed at the groin. Who put the tourniquet on? She asked. Miller did, Logan muttered. I told him if he screwed it up, I would come back and haunt him. It is holding enough for now, Riley said, but he is leaking somewhere else. She palpated his abdomen, watched his face for reaction. His jaw ticked. Pain there, she asked. Define pain, he said. Smart mouth, mid, she replied. That is a good sign. She checked his chest, next, fingers tracing the line of his ribs, ears tuned to each breath. The right side moved less than the left. There was a faint crepitus under her palm. Get me an 18 gauge in the right arm, she told Damon. Hang blood, not fluids. 2 units pressure bag. Carla, you on airway, he added. The other medic nodded, hands already checking Logan's jaw, the position of his head. Riley grabbed a pen and made a quick mark on Logan's chest, counting ribs by touch. Feels like a broken rib, Logan said. Souvenir. If it shifts wrong, your lung collapses, she said. Try not to think of it as a souvenir. Soldiers were gathering around the edges of the space drawn by the gravity of their sergeant major's stretcher. Their faces hovered just outside the pool of light, eyes dark tense. Riley worked more quickly. She reassessed the tourniquet, tightened it a half turn, watched the seep slow. She checked Logan's pupils. They responded but sluggishly. Logan, she said, leaning close. Stay with me. You do not die in a tent. We talked about this. We did, see? He asked. You promised, she said. The flap at the entrance of the tent snapped open. A man in a tan uniform stepped in, ducking the canvas. His rank tabs glinted. Lieutenant Colonel Everett carried himself like someone used to rooms quieting when he entered them. They did not this time. The room was too busy, the noise too layered. He frowned at the apparent lack of reaction, then his gaze landed on Riley. He saw a woman in blood-streaked scrubs, no visible rank, giving orders as if she belonged at the center of his operation. Who are you, Shah? He demanded. Riley did not look up from Logan's chest. Busy, she said. I am the senior medical officer on this base, he said. You will address me when I ask a question. Damon shot Riley a quick, nervous glance. The other medic took half a step back. Everett moved closer. I asked who you are, he said, and why you are performing procedures without my authorization. Riley finished palpating Logan's ribcage, then finally looked at Everett. Price has a probable femoral artery injury and signs of a developing tension pneumothorax, she said. He is hypotensive and hypoxic. If I wait for your authorization, he dies. Everett bristled. You are a civilian nurse, he said. You do not have clearance to perform advanced interventions in this theater. Logan turned his head slightly. It cost him, but he did it. The hell she does not, he said. His voice came out thin, but there was iron behind it. She is the reason I am here at all. Sergeant Major Price, you are in no position to... Sir, Logan said. It was barely more than a whisper, but it cut through Everett's sentence. With respect, shut up and let her work. Someone near the back coughed to cover a laugh. The sound died quickly, but it broke the tension. Riley turned back to Logan. Breath feels tighter, he said, forcing air through his teeth. I know, she said. She picked up the needle from the set in her kit, checked its length against the mark she had made. Her hand hovered for a moment over the spot on his chest. The tent noise seemed to pull away. For a second she heard only the rasp of Logan's breath and the low drum of her own heart. On my count, she said, more for the others than for him. 3, 2, 1. She slid the needle in between his ribs. There was resistance, then a sudden give. A hiss of air rushed past the hub. Logan sucked in a breath that sounded easier than the one before it. The monitor at his side flickered, then steadied. The oxygen saturation crept upward a few points at a time. The room held very still. Damon let out a breath he had apparently been holding. Chest rise is better, he said quietly. Riley secured the catheter, taped it down, then swept her gaze back up Logan's body, cataloging changes. Color slightly improved, mentation clearer, legs still a problem. Keep the blood going, she told Damon. Cross-match for more. Everett stared at her, a muscle working in his jaw. You had no authority to countermand my control of this tent, he said. You cannot simply walk in here and override the chain of command. Your chain of command is not bleeding out on this table, she said. He is. Before Everett could answer, the tent flap opened again. This time the space quieted on its own. A taller figure stepped in, shoulders squared, uniform immaculate despite the dust. Stars glittered on his collar. Lieutenant General Marcus Whitaker's gaze swept the tent, taking in the cots, the machines, the cluster around Logan. He saw Riley at the center, hands, still on the edge of the table chest, rising and falling faster than normal. He walked straight toward her. "Corporal Hart," he said, his voice carried without being loud. Riley straightened. She had not heard that rank spoken aloud in years. It fit, and did not fit at the same time. "Sir," she said. Whitaker came to attention and lifted his hand in a precise salute. "You are still in the fight," he said. Around them, medics and soldiers watched. Some blinked, unsure they were seeing what they thought they saw. A general with 3 stars on his chest saluting a woman in no visible uniform whose name they had only just heard. Riley hesitated for a fraction of a second, then returned the salute, hand steady. Whitaker lowered his arm and turned to the rest of the tent. "I have been briefed," he said. Go, he said. "Sergeant Major Price is alive because she refused to wait, because she acted when action was needed." His gaze flicked toward Everett, then back to the group as a whole. "Remember that," he said. "All of you. Remember who kept their head when things went sideways in here." The soldiers around the edges of the room began to clap. It started almost tentatively, then grew. The sound filled the tent, bounced off poles and canvas. Some of the wounded on nearby cots lifted their hands and joined in small motions that cost them energy they did not really have. Logan closed his eyes and let his head sink back, the faintest smile on his face. Riley did not smile. Her shoulders loosened by a small degree. She looked down at her hands. For once they were still. The clapping faded slowly like a tide pulling back from shore. Work did not stop. Damon checked Logan's lines again. Someone adjusted an oxygen mask on the next cot. The tent's heat pressed in, filled with the smell of sweat and antiseptic and canvas. Later, when Logan was stable enough to move, they loaded him and the other serious casualties onto a waiting transport. Engines roared. The night swallowed the vehicles as they rolled toward a bigger facility farther from the line. Riley stepped out of the tent and into cooler air. The sky above the base was black, pricked with stars. The landing zone lights had been dimmed. The Black Hawk that brought her in sat quiet, now a dark shape against the tarmac. She stood for a moment with her hands on her hips, breathing more slowly than she had in hours. Dust clung to her hair. Her scrubs were stiff with dried blood that was not hers. Torres walked up beside her. "He is on his way," Torres said. "You bought him that." "He bought it himself when he decided not to duck," Riley answered. They stood in silence a few seconds, watching a truck move along the far fence line. "General Whitaker wants to speak with you before you head back," Torres said. Riley nodded. The gathering happened in a long, low building near the center of the base. The room was not grand. Concrete floor-folding chairs, a few maps pinned to boards. A handful of officers stood at the edges. A line of soldiers filled the chairs, some still in dusty gear, some in t-shirts and fatigue pants, hair wet from quick showers. Riley stood off to the side, feeling oddly out of place in her stained hospital shoes. Whitaker stepped to the front. The murmur in the room died without anyone having to ask for quiet. "You all know why you're here," he said. "You saw it, or you heard it. Your sergeant major is not in a body bag tonight." He tipped his head toward Riley. "Because someone refused to let a checklist make up their mind for them." The soldier's eyes tracked to her. Some faces she recognized from the tent, others she did not. She saw respect, fatigue, a kind of hungry curiosity. Whitaker continued. "We train for structure," he said. "We rely on it. Without it, you get chaos. We also train for decisions. Split-second ones. The wrong decision will kill you. So will no decision." He let that sit in the air, then nodded once. "Captain Torres tells me Hart is headed back to whatever civilian life we dragged her out of," he said. "I will say this before she goes. She is exactly the kind of medic I want in my theater. She's not comfortable. She is not easy. She is necessary." Whitaker did not look at Riley when he said it. He looked at the men and women in front of him, making sure they were the ones who heard it. Afterward, he caught Riley by the door. "You did not have to answer that call," he said. "Someone gave Torres my name," she replied. "I thought that was the call." His mouth curved slightly. "Fair enough," he said. "If you ever decide you are done pretending to be a civilian, you let us know." She did not answer. He did not press. 2 days later, a dark sedan with government plates pulled up along a quiet street in Riverside Rain, washed clean since the day she left. Riley sat in the back seat, jacket zipped up, ID tag, a small weight in her inner pocket. "Here is good," she told the driver. He pulled in near the loading dock behind St. Gabriel. The hospital rose above them, same red sign, same grid of windows. It looked unchanged, like the last few days had never happened. Riley stepped out. The asphalt was still damp in the shadows. The air smelled of laundry from the hospital vents and weak coffee from somewhere nearby. At the back gate, a handful of people stood in a loose knot. She recognized them even from a distance. Carla, arms crossed. A couple of techs who usually joked too loudly at the nurses' station quiet now. Dr. Jameen Gwynn, hands jammed in the pockets of a jacket that looked one size too big. They had no reason to be here at this hour. No official memo had gone out announcing her return. Yet here they were, eyes fixed on the corner where she had just appeared. For a moment no one moved. Riley walked toward them at a steady pace. Her shoes made small wet sounds on the concrete. As she came closer, she saw more clearly what was written on their faces. Guilt, relief, something like awe, the kind people got when they realized a story from a screen had a living person attached to it. Jamie was the first to speak. "I saw the news," Jamie said. "On the monitor in the break room. That was you." Riley stopped a few feet away. "The hair was worse on the news," she said. "Too much dust." Jamie's laugh came out as a short, choked sound. "You saved a special operations unit," Jamie said. "You did it right after this place." She could not finish. Her throat worked. Carla cleared her throat. "We should have backed you up," Carla said. "With Benji, with the fire, with all of it." "It is done," Riley said. Her tone was even. Not forgiving, not accusing, just a statement. Behind the group, the back door opened. A small figure slipped out, followed by a woman in a rain jacket. Benji Carter had not grown in 2 days, but he seemed larger somehow, more solid on his feet. The bruise-like shadows under his eyes had faded. He still clutched the same stuffed dinosaur. His mother spotted Riley and stopped short. Her hand tightened on Benji's shoulder. "There," Benji said, pointing. His voice was bright, cutting through the heavy air. "That is her. I told you, Mom." He wriggled free from his mother's grip and ran shoes slapping on the concrete. Water splashed from a shallow puddle as he hit it full on. Riley had just enough time to brace herself before he crashed into her legs and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You are back," he said, chin digging into her stomach. He had to tilt his head all the way up to see her face. "You are the best nurse in the whole world." The words were simple and polished, not rehearsed for any camera. Riley's hand came up almost on its own. She smoothed his damp hair back from his forehead like she had done in the treatment room when he was gray around the mouth and silent. "Hi, Benji," she said. "You look better out here." "I can breathe," he said. "And I watched TV. They had soldiers. You were with them." He bounced a little where he stood dinosaur digging into her hip. His mother reached them breathless. Up close, Riley could see the streaks of dried salt on her cheeks, signs of tears shed out of sight. "I did not know," the woman said. Her voice shook. "When you were in that room with him, I did not know who you were. I just saw your hands." Riley glanced down at her own hands. The knuckles were a little scraped. Someone else's blood still stained the cuticle of one nail, a thin line she had missed. "They do most of the work," she said. The woman looked over at the knot of hospital staff at the locked door behind them, then back at Riley. "They fired you," she said. "And then the news said the army flew in to get you because you were the only one they trusted not to let their men die." Her voice cracked on the last word. "How do you fire that and sleep at night?" she asked, not to Riley but to the building itself. No one from St. Gabriel had an answer. Carla shifted eyes on the ground. One of the techs rubbed the back of his neck. Jamie's gaze burned a hole in the concrete. Riley felt Benji's arms tighten for a moment, then loosen. He stepped back a half pace but stayed close, shoulder pressed to her thigh. She looked at the faces around her. The shame there was sharp, but it was not the only thing. There was under it a kind of fragile readiness, a willingness to see that something had been wrong all along, not just in the moment they signed a form. "I did what I know how to do," Riley said. "So did you, just in different directions." She turned to Benji and crouched so they were level. "You keep breathing," she said. "That is your job for me." He nodded solemnly, as if she had given him a mission. Riley stood again. The group shifted to make a space, as if expecting her to walk past them back into the hospital. Her gaze flicked to the back door. Beyond it lay hallways she could have walked with her eyes closed. Med carts, supply closets, the conference room where she had signed her name away. She did not move toward it. The sedan that had brought her waited at the curb engine, idling softly. She gave Carla a small nod, gave Jamie another, looked once more at the boy with the dinosaur. Then she turned and walked toward the car. Behind her the murmurs started back up, low and uneasy. Benji waved until she opened the passenger door. Riley raised a hand in return. When she slid into the seat and closed the door, the sounds of the hospital yard cut off. The quiet inside the car felt strange. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Back to your place?" he asked. "For now," she said. He pulled away from the curb. Riley looked down at her hands resting in her lap. In the glass of the window, her reflection overlapped the image of the hospital receding behind her. She could see both at once. Her building was quiet when she got home. The stairwell smelled of dust and someone else's cooking. The hallway lights flickered once before settling. Her apartment door stuck at the bottom like it always did. She bumped it with her hip and went inside. It was a small place. Worn couch, secondhand table, a single plant, trying to survive on the windowsill. The sound of the city below filtered up as a dull, constant murmur. Her scrub stiff with dried blood and dirt looked wrong against the clean line of the kitchen counter when she tossed her jacket down. The government sedan pulled away outside. Its engine noise faded into the rest of the street. On the floor just inside the door against the wall where the mail slot emptied lay a single heavy envelope. No junk flyers, no pizza coupons, just thick cream paper with a seal in the corner. Department of Defense. Riley stared at it for a moment, then bent and picked it up. The envelope had weight more than its size should allow. The raised ink of the seal scraped her fingertips as she turned it. At the table, she slid a finger under the flap and opened it. There was a cover sheet typed and formal. Behind it, a letter with a real signature ink pressed slightly into the page. Corporal Riley Hart. Request to return to active duty. Promotion to captain upon acceptance. Assignment as Director of Combat Medical Training for Special Operations Forces. The words sat on the paper black and controlled. Under them a line that caught just for an instant. We are creating this position in recognition of demonstrated field leadership and critical decision-making under fire. She read it twice. At the edge of her awareness, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor laughed, the sound muffled by drywall. She set the letter down and went to the small shelf by the window. On it sat a wooden box, old, the hinges a little loose. She opened it. Inside lay a few things she had not wanted to throw away. A faded unit patch. A photograph of 8 people in dusty gear faces, sunburned teeth bright against brown and gray. In the center of the photo, Riley squinted at the camera sand caught in her hair. Logan stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, grin lopsided. She touched the edge of the picture. Then she took the ID tag from her jacket and placed it in the box next to the photo. For a long moment she stood there, hands resting on the sides of the box, eyes closed. The hospital had called her dangerous for moving too fast. The battlefield had called her too late once when a radio failed and a bird did not launch. Now a letter lay on her table asking her to step into a place between those two worlds to decide how others would be taught to move. She opened her eyes. On the counter her phone buzzed. The hospital address glowed on the screen, ceo@estgabrielmed.org. She tapped it open. The email was careful, every sentence smoothed. Evelyn Powell thanked her for her service, for her courage, for bringing positive attention to St. Gabriel despite their earlier misunderstanding. The board of directors extended an apology for how her employment had ended. They wished to offer her a new position, Chief of Nursing Standards, with expanded influence and a revised mandate. Riley leaned against the counter and read it twice. Then she clicked reply. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second, then they moved. Thank you for your apology. I do not need a title to do my job. I need a place that allows it. She looked at the words, added nothing more, and hit send. The next scene in her memory was the wind at the base, but there were days of paperwork and signatures between. Uniform refitting. A briefing that tasted like every other briefing she had ever sat through, except this time her name was followed by Captain. The day of the first training cycle dawned clear. The base was different from the forward outpost, larger, more permanent. Barracks lined up in neat rows. A chow hall that smelled of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. A wide parade ground sat at the center like a concrete lake. A company of recruits stood in formation there, boots planted, faces turned toward the makeshift stage where a microphone waited. Their uniforms were still stiff. Their packs neatly stacked by the bleachers looked barely broken in. Off to the side, helicopters sat on a pad, their rotors at rest. For once the blades were silent. General Whitaker stood at the microphone first. His voice carried across the space with no effort. He spoke about the recent incident, about the fire in the steel plant, about a nurse in a city hospital and a medic in a tent. He did not say everything. He did not need to. Then he stepped back and nodded to her. Riley walked up the steps to the small stage. The new uniform felt strange across her shoulders, the rank at her collar both heavier and lighter than she had expected. The ID tag lay flat against her chest under the fabric, cool against her skin. She took the microphone. Up close, the recruits were a row of sharp edges, jaw lines, eyebrows, nerves. Some tried not to show it. Some did not bother. My name is Captain Riley Hart, Joish Fad. I am your new Director of Combat Medical Training. The word director felt foreign in her mouth. She let it sit there and did not apologize for it. You will learn a lot of lists here, she said. Steps, protocols, acronyms. You will need them, learn them, drill them. They will be your baseline when you are tired and scared. She paused, letting them breathe with her. But there will be moments when no one is telling you what to do next. No officer, no checklist. You will have someone on the ground in front of you who is bleeding or who cannot breathe or whose eyes are starting to go somewhere else. Her gaze swept the formation. In those moments, your hands are your tools. Your mind is your command center. You decide, you move, you live with it. A bird called from the fence. The sound fell flat against the concrete and faded. I am not here to make you comfortable, she said. I am here to make sure that when those seconds come, you are faster than your fear. She stepped back from the microphone. Whitaker gave a small nod of approval, but the important thing was the look on the recruits' faces. A few of them straightened a fraction. One in the front swallowed hard as if the words had gone down like something real and heavy. Later, on the training field by the helipad, the sound of rotors returned. This time it belonged to a practice bird running idle. The wind it kicked up was familiar but not crushing. The smell of fuel mixed with fresh-cut grass. A medic instructor stood by with a stopwatch. A row of young soldiers gripped a stretcher knuckles white. Again, Riley said, from the door to the bird, smooth, no dropped lines, no banging heads. They lifted as one jogged forward, placed the stretcher pulled back. Not perfect, clumsy in the turns. She stepped in, rearranged two of their grips, shifted one recruit's hand a few inches up the rail. Feel that, she said. Less strain, more control. Do it until it is muscle memory. Your body should move the right way before your brain finishes the thought. They ran the drill again, faster, cleaner. The helicopter's rotors drew circles in the air above them, steady, contained. No emergency call, no siren, just the rhythm of a machine waiting for its crew to be ready. Riley watched their hands. Watched them learn to move in sync to get in and out of danger in one unbroken flow. She felt the ID tag against her chest, the press of metal a reminder and a promise. The wind tugged at her sleeves. She planted her boots a little wider and stayed where she was. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.